When Commander Kalen Voss's shadow touched the alien glyphs, they didn't just glow. They sang. His entire recon unit watched as the canyon walls transformed from ancient rock into a living star map. But the Kirath weren't there to study history. They were there to defend what they called holy ground. Now Kalen stands between two armies with the temple itself awakening around him. This isn't a military operation anymore. It's becoming something far more dangerous and personal. The twin suns baked the rust-colored stone, sending heat shimmers dancing across the canyon floor. Kalen's team moved carefully, boots crunching on crystalline dust. Their scanners had been whining softly for half an hour, the small red lights on their wrist units insisting that the rock itself was giving off anomalous energy readings. Private Chen knelt, running her gloved fingers over the carvings. "This isn't art," she said. Her voice sounded thin in the dry air. "The patterns are too consistent, too structured. So what is it?" Kalen asked, his own scanner still pointed at the wall. "Quantum-encoded storage." She glanced back at him. "It's not writing, it's data. Like a hard drive carved in stone." As if on cue, the symbols began to flicker. A soft internal light pulsed behind the crystalline surface, a faint blue glow that seemed to breathe. Then a low harmonic tone filled the canyon, so deep it vibrated through the soles of their boots. The sound wasn't loud. It was heavy. The walls shifted. The static carvings began rearranging themselves, lines of light flowing across the surface like water. Kalen took a step back, his shadow falling across a cluster of glyphs. They flared brighter at his touch, the light intensifying until he had to shield his eyes. "It's reacting to us," Chen said. Her voice held a mix of awe and alarm. The harmonic tone deepened, resonating in their bones. The light patterns accelerated, shifting from what looked like star charts to something more complex, more alive. The team stood frozen, watching as the entire canyon seemed to wake up. What they had thought was ancient architecture began to look less like a ruin and more like circuitry. "We're not standing in a temple," Kalen said quietly. He looked at the walls, then at the way the light bent around the curves of the canyon. "We're standing inside an engine." The realization hit them all at once. This wasn't a place of worship. It was a machine, and their presence had just turned it on. The quantum-encoded information stored in the rock wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be activated, and human DNA was the key. Chen's scanner began flashing urgently. "The energy readings are off the scale. It's not just emitting, it's receiving. It's pulling data from somewhere." The harmonic tone shifted, layering into a chord that seemed to rearrange the air itself. Kalen looked down at his hands, half expecting to see his own skin begin to glow. The canyon was no longer silent. It was humming with purpose, and they were standing right in the middle of it. The harmonic tone shifted from a low hum to a clear, sharp warning. It cut through the canyon air like a blade, vibrating through their teeth now instead of just their boots. Light bent strangely around the canyon entrance, warping the view of the desert beyond like heat haze over an engine. Then they appeared. The Kirath warriors materialized without sound, their forms emerging from the distorted light as if stepping through a curtain. Their armor wasn't solid. It flowed like liquid mercury, shifting between states in a way that made human eyes hurt to watch. One moment it looked like polished metal. The next it seemed to dissolve into shimmering energy patterns only to reform into something else entirely. Riley's voice came over the comm, low and tight. "Their tech configuration, it's nothing like anything we've cataloged. The energy signatures are reading like theoretical physics, not combat gear." The Kirath formed a perfect containment perimeter without speaking, without even looking at each other. They moved with the coordination of a single mind. Their weapons held at ready positions that looked both ceremonial and deadly. Their faces remained hidden behind faceless helms that reflected the canyon's glowing walls. Kalen watched them take positions along the higher ridges, their movements too smooth, too precise. They weren't pointing weapons yet, but the message was clear. This wasn't just territory. This was something else entirely. "We're not in a strategic location," Kalen said quietly into his comm. "We're in a church." The temple walls responded to the Kirath's presence differently than they had to the humans. Where the human touch had made the glyphs glow brighter, the Kirath presence made the patterns reorganize into new configurations. The light patterns accelerated, flowing up the walls toward the canyon rim. Then the temple began broadcasting. A new frequency joined the harmonic tone. This one aimed straight up through the canyon, opening into the sky. The light patterns on the walls shifted from star maps to what looked like mathematical equations, complex symbols flowing like water down the stone surfaces. The Kirath warriors didn't advance. They held their positions, their shifting armor catching the light from the walls. One of them turned its helmet toward Kalen, and though he couldn't see eyes, he felt the weight of that attention. It wasn't hostile exactly, more like protective, guarding something that shouldn't have been touched. Chen's voice came through, strained. "They're not here to fight us. They're here to contain the breach." We set off an alarm. The broadcasting signal intensified, the light from the walls becoming almost too bright to look at directly. The Kirath warriors raised their weapons in unison, not aiming at the humans but at the sky, as if expecting something to answer the temple's call. Kalen watched the way the Kirath moved, the reverence in their stance even as they maintained combat readiness. Their technology wasn't just advanced weaponry, it was integrated with the temple itself, part of the same system. The fluid armor, the silent coordination, the way they seemed to understand what the temple was doing without needing to communicate. This wasn't an invasion force. It was a sacred guard, and humanity had just walked right into their most holy place and started pushing buttons. The harmonic tone shifted again, layering into something that sounded almost like chanting. The Kirath warriors began to move in slow, precise patterns around the canyon perimeter, their steps matching the rhythm of the temple's song. Their defense of the site wasn't just tactical, it was ceremonial. Their advanced technology wasn't for conquest. It was for protection of something they considered divine. The temple's broadcast pulsed stronger, sending ripples of light through the Kirath armor as if they were part of the same circuit. The warriors became living extensions of the ancient machine, their presence completing a system that had been dormant until humans arrived to trigger it. The temple wasn't just awake, it was paying attention. The star maps on the walls dissolved into something far more immediate. The crystalline surfaces began displaying real-time tactical information, the glowing symbols rearranging themselves into formation patterns and weapon status readouts. Admiral Morrison's dreadnoughts appeared on the display, their positions tracked with unsettling precision. The temple showed their approach vectors, their shield harmonics, even their reactor output levels. It was like watching a live feed from the fleet's own command center, except the data looked more detailed than anything human systems could provide. Then a separate signal bloomed on the display. Something was approaching from the outer system, moving fast. Its energy signature didn't register on normal spectra. The temple's display showed space itself bending around the approaching entity, the visual representation warping like heat distortion over desert pavement. The readings made no sense. Energy levels that shouldn't be possible. Mass readings that fluctuated between 0 and astronomical. Space-time inside the temple complex began to refract. The air took on a strange quality, like looking through old glass. Kalen watched as past and present seemed to layer over each other. For a moment he saw his own team entering the canyon hours earlier, their images transparent and ghostly. Then he saw possible futures flickering, the Kirath attacking, the human fleet firing, the canyon walls crumbling under bombardment. The images overlapped and interfered with each other, creating a dizzying collage of what was, what might be, and what could have been. The temple's harmonic tone changed pitch, becoming something that felt less like sound and more like structured mathematics given voice. The Kirath warriors moved with renewed urgency, their fluid armor shifting patterns as they coordinated with the temple's displays. They weren't looking at the humans anymore. Their attention was fixed on the approaching anomaly. Kalen understood suddenly. The Kirath weren't trying to start a war. They were trying to prevent one. Their defense of the temple wasn't about territory or resources. It was about containing whatever was coming. The temple wasn't a religious site. It was an early warning system, a navigation station that could see across time and space. The displays showed the entity's approach in disturbing detail. Normal space-time metrics broke down around it. Light bent in impossible angles. The temple's system struggled to represent the phenomenon, switching between different mathematical models that each failed to fully capture what was happening. The entity wasn't just traveling through space, it was rewriting the rules as it moved. Past and present continued to layer within the temple. Kalen saw glimpses of other visitors throughout history, different species, different eras, all drawn to this place. Some had come in peace. Others had come with weapons. The temple recorded everything, its memory stretching back further than human civilization. The Kirath moved with purpose now, their actions making sense in context. They weren't guards. They were operators. Their shifting armor interfaced directly with the temple systems, their movements coordinating with the flowing light patterns on the walls. They were trying to stabilize something, to contain the disturbance before it reached critical levels. Kalen watched the tactical display update. The human fleet was closing in, weapons hot. The unknown entity was approaching from the opposite direction, bending reality around itself. And the temple sat in the middle, showing everything in real time with a clarity that human technology couldn't match. This wasn't just a building with some fancy displays. It was a living system that perceived the cosmos in ways nobody had imagined, a temporal navigation station that could see threats coming before they arrived, and was trying to warn everyone who would listen. Kalen felt it first in his teeth. A vibration that wasn't sound but something deeper. The world sharpened around him. Colors bleeding into spectra human eyes weren't meant to register. He saw the heat shimmer off the canyon walls as rippling waves of infrared. The Kirath armor glowed with energy patterns that pulsed in rhythms matching the temple's heartbeat. He could suddenly see the magnetic fields wrapping around everything like invisible spiderwebs. He blinked. The world didn't return to normal. Instead, it layered. He saw the solid forms of his team, but also their thermal signatures, their bioelectric fields, even the faint energy trails they left in the air as they moved. It was like watching multiple camera feeds at once, each showing a different layer of reality. Then the vision started. Winged beings moved through his perception like dancers between dimensions. They weren't quite solid, not quite energy, something in between. They flowed through the temple walls without disturbing them, their forms shifting between physical and non-physical states. He saw them moving through nebulas, their wings catching solar winds like cosmic sails. They passed through solid matter as if it were mist, their presence bending space around them. His body began changing without his consent. It felt like someone had opened a control panel in his spine and started rewiring things. His nervous system lit up with new connections, synapses firing along pathways that hadn't existed moments before. He could feel the temple systems interfacing with his biology, upgrading him like some kind of ancient alien plumbing project. It wasn't painful exactly, but it felt invasive, like getting a software update you never asked for. "Chen," he said, but his voice came out wrong. He could hear the vibration of his own vocal cords, see the sound waves traveling through the air. "Something's happening to me." She looked at him, her expression concerned. "Your eyes are doing that shimmer thing, like the Kirath armor." He tried to describe it to her. "It's like being hooked up to every sensor array at once. I can see energy fields, thermal signatures. There are things moving through the walls. Winged things." The temple pulsed around them and another wave of changes hit him. His bones ached as their density shifted. His muscles reconfigured themselves, fibers aligning in new patterns. He could feel his cellular structure changing, adapting to handle the sensory overload. It was the most intimate violation he'd ever experienced, his own body becoming foreign territory. Dream fragments started intruding on his waking moments. Soaring flights through cosmic clouds, diving through asteroid fields with the winged beings as companions. He'd blink and see ghost images of star systems overlaying the canyon walls. The dreams felt more real than the physical world, like memories of places he'd never been. His physiology was becoming something else. Not quite human, not quite alien. A hybrid system that could perceive multiple dimensions at once. He found he could focus on different reality layers individually. Watch just the thermal spectrum, or just the electromagnetic fields. The winged beings became clearer when he focused on certain frequencies. They seemed aware of his presence, turning their attention toward him across dimensional barriers. The temple's systems continued their work. He could feel them integrating with his nervous system, creating feedback loops between his perceptions and the ancient machine. He wasn't just observing the temple anymore. He was becoming part of it. His human biology served as the interface point, the bridge that allowed the temple systems to connect with physical reality. The winged beings moved closer in his enhanced vision. They didn't speak in words but conveyed concepts directly, an invitation, a warning, a sense of ancient purpose. They flowed around him like currents in some invisible ocean, their presence stabilizing the chaotic sensory input. His transformation wasn't random mutation. It was specific targeted engineering. The temple had chosen him as its living interface, rewriting his biology to serve as the connection point between human reality and whatever existed beyond. He could feel the dimensional barriers thinning around him. The winged beings became more substantial in his perception, their forms resolving into clearer detail. They weren't threatening. They looked expectant, waiting for him to complete the connection. His human physiology was the key that could open doors these beings couldn't approach directly. The temple had made him into something new, a bridge between realities anchored in human form but capable of perceiving so much more. Kalen's enhanced senses brought the winged guardians into sharp relief. They moved through the stone and air with equal ease, their forms flickering between solid and ethereal. They looked less like creatures and more like conscious patterns given shape. Winged silhouettes woven from starlight and dimensional energy. They passed through the canyon walls like dancers between raindrops, leaving faint traceries of light in their wake. Their movements held a grace that felt ancient, practiced across epochs. One of them lingered near Kalen, its form resolving into clearer focus. It didn't speak in words, but concepts flowered in his mind. Kithra, its name or perhaps its function. The understanding came with images, sensations. It showed him the guardians not as abandoning their temples but stepping back from them. Their departure wasn't neglect. It was a strategic withdrawal. The temple had been a gateway, Kithra showed him, a point where realities intersected, where cosmic evolution could be guided or accelerated, but it was also a vulnerability. If the wrong hands activated the systems prematurely, or with the wrong intent, the resulting energy release could unravel local space-time. It wouldn't just destroy worlds, it would unmake causality itself. The Guardians had left to create a safety buffer. Their very presence near the temple generated resonant frequencies that lowered the activation threshold. By withdrawing, they made the system harder to trigger accidentally. They turned the temple into a lock that required a specific key, a species capable of handling the transition without causing a cascade failure. Kithra showed him the conditions that had to be met. A biological template stable enough to anchor the dimensional shifts, a cognitive framework flexible enough to interpret the sensory overload, an evolutionary trajectory that suggested readiness for the next step. Humanity in its current state was close enough to trigger the systems but not yet ready to control them. The Guardians had been waiting. Not for a particular species but for the right evolutionary moment. They monitored countless worlds, watching for the first signs of a consciousness capable of bridging the gap between biological limitation and cosmic awareness. Their return would signal that the conditions were met. Their presence would herald either a new phase of cosmic evolution or a catastrophic failure that would sterilize entire sectors. Kalen understood his role now. The temple hadn't chosen him randomly. His particular genetic makeup, his neural pathways, even his military training and rapid situational assessment, all made him a viable interface. The temple's systems had scanned the team and identified him as the best candidate. He wasn't just a visitor, he was the test subject, the trial run. The winged beings hadn't abandoned their creation. They'd been standing by, watching through dimensional veils, waiting for someone to step onto the cosmic welcome mat. Kalen's transformation made him that mat. His altered biology created a stable point they could approach without triggering the system's automatic defenses. He was becoming the anchor that would allow their return without causing the very disaster they'd left to prevent. Kithra showed him the alternative timelines, where things went wrong. Worlds turning inside out, civilizations ending not with explosions but with gradual unraveling, stars fading from existence as causal chains broke down. The Guardians had seen these possibilities and made the choice to step back, to wait until the universe produced a species that could handle the transition without breaking everything. The temple's systems continued to interface with Kalen's biology, stabilizing the connection. The winged beings drew closer, their presence no longer causing the dimensional fluctuations that would have signaled premature activation. Through Kalen, they could approach safely. Through him, the system could be brought online gradually, carefully, without the catastrophic energy spikes that would have accompanied their unmediated return. He wasn't just a bridge between species. He was a failsafe, a biological regulator that would allow the Guardians to complete their work without destroying everything they meant to nurture. The cosmic welcome mat had to be sturdy enough to handle some messy boots, and Kalen was finding out just how much mud the universe tracked in. The Kirath dreadnoughts arrived without warning, sliding into normal space like knives through silk. Their ships didn't look like vessels so much as architectural distortions, impossible angles folding through reality, their surfaces shifting between solid and not quite there. The weapons that emerged from their hulls didn't fire projectiles or energy beams. They emitted something subtler, something worse. Reality itself began to unravel around the temple. The air took on a strange viscosity, light bending in unnatural curves. Soldiers on the ground watched as their surroundings started aging backwards. The canyon walls eroded, then reassembled themselves, rocks crumbling to dust only to reform from nothing. Their own equipment underwent the same process. Weapons rusted into powder, then reappeared factory new on their belts. One soldier watched his combat knife disintegrate into reddish dust only to reform in his hand, the metal cool and unmarked. The effect wasn't just visual. They experienced the reversal physically. Memories flickered, eating rations they hadn't consumed yet, feeling wounds heal before they'd been inflicted. Time lost its arrow, cause and effect traded places. A Marine watched his own hands age 60 years in seconds, skin wrinkling, joints stiffening, then reverse back to youth. The disorientation hit worse than any concussive blast. It was watching your own existence become negotiable. Communications died completely. The reality distortion generated a Faraday cage effect that blocked all signals. Radios produced only static, even across short distances. Team members standing meters apart couldn't hear each other shout. The silence felt heavier than any battlefield noise. They were isolated in bubbles of distorted time, each soldier experiencing their personal reality collapse. Then Admiral Morrison's fleet dropped into the mess. Human dreadnoughts translated into the warped space with chaotic splendor, their arrival tearing fresh holes in already compromised reality. The ships emerged from jump space into conditions their nav systems couldn't handle. They listed badly, their trajectories bending in impossible curves as local physics broke down. Their weapon systems, designed for normal space combat, fired wildly, energy beams curving back on themselves in the distorted space. The three forces found themselves trapped together in the reality maelstrom. Human soldiers experienced their world dying in reverse multiple times. Kirath warriors moved through the chaos with more stability, their fluid armor seeming to adapt to the shifting physics. But even they showed signs of distress, their movements becoming less coordinated. The winged beings Kalen perceived flickered in and out of visibility, their forms destabilized by the temporal distortions. Weapons fire from the human ships curved back on their sources. Missiles described impossible trajectories, turning circles in space that shouldn't have been possible. The Kirath vessels didn't so much evade as they allowed the distorted physics to flow around them, their shapes blurring at the edges as they integrated with the chaos. The temple itself responded to the assault. Its walls pulsed with defensive energies, creating zones of stabilized reality around itself. But the stabilization wasn't perfect. It created patchwork areas where time flowed normally adjacent to zones where reality continued to unravel. Soldiers might take one step into normal space and the next into an area where their bodies aged decades in a heartbeat. The three species weren't fighting each other anymore. They were all victims of the same phenomenon. Human, Kirath, and the flickering winged beings all struggled to maintain coherence in the face of weapons that didn't just destroy matter but rewrote the rules of existence itself. The battlefield became a laboratory demonstration of physics gone wrong, with living beings as the test subjects. Mutual annihilation became a real possibility, not through weapons fire, but through the complete unraveling of local space-time. The Kirath had brought a weapon that could unmake reality itself, and in doing so had trapped everyone in a shared extinction event. Their reality-warping artillery showed everyone exactly how their world would end, not with a bang, but with a rewind button held down too long. Amid the temporal chaos, the temple revealed its true contingency system. A new pattern emerged on the walls, different from the star maps or tactical displays. This one showed a perfect sphere of distorted space-time centered on the canyon, with complex equations describing its properties. The system had a simple purpose. It could isolate a section of reality and sever it from the timeline completely. The display showed the sphere expanding to engulf the temple complex, the human and Kirath forces, even the approaching fleet elements. Everything within that bubble would be erased. Not destroyed, but removed from existence as if it had never been. The effect would roll back the last 6 hours of history within the isolated zone. No memory, no wreckage, no evidence. Just a clean deletion of everything that had happened since the humans first entered the canyon. The system offered a choice. Activate the severance field and reset the timeline to before the trespass. The temple would go dormant again. The Kirath would stand down. The human fleet would never have detected the anomaly. Everything would return to the status quo, with no one remembering these events except as a gap in their records. Kalen watched the display with his enhanced senses. He could see the mechanics of it, the way the field would fold space-time back on itself, creating a closed loop that would then be excised from the timeline. The process was clean, surgical. It wouldn't cause collateral damage outside the affected area. It was the universe's ultimate undo button. The Kirath warriors had stopped their defensive maneuvers. They watched the display, their fluid armor still shifting but their postures more attentive. They understood what was being offered. This was their last resort, the final option when containment failed. The system could solve the immediate crisis by making it never happen, but the cost was absolute. Everyone within the field would be erased. Human soldiers, Kirath warriors, ships, equipment, all would vanish from history. The temple itself would remain, but the events surrounding it would be wiped clean. It was the ultimate isolation play. Cut off the infected limb to save the body. Kalen's team watched the display with growing horror. They could see their own positions marked within the proposed severance field. The system didn't discriminate between friend and foe. It would erase them all equally. The choice was simple: mutual annihilation or mutual forgetting. Either everyone died in the reality collapse or everyone got reset to before this started. The Kirath seemed to be waiting. Their weapons remained active but not aimed. They watched the humans, waiting to see what they would choose. The severity engine was the temple's final defense mechanism, but it required consensus to activate. Both sides had to agree to the reset. Kalen looked at the Kirath warriors, then at his own team. He saw the fear on their faces, the realization that they might simply cease to exist, but he also saw something else in the temple's display. The system wasn't just a weapon, it was a test. The temple was offering them a choice between isolation and connection. They could cut themselves off from this crisis and return to ignorance, or they could find another way forward together. The severance engine represented the old way, the Kirath way of protecting their secrets through absolute containment. But there might be another option. His enhanced senses picked up subtle cues from the temple systems. The severance protocol wasn't the only available response. It was just the safest, most conservative option. The temple was waiting to see if they would choose the easy way out or try something riskier. The winged beings watched from the edges of his perception. They seemed interested in the choice but not alarmed. This was part of the test. Species that chose isolation over collaboration weren't ready for what came next. The severance engine was the universe's way of checking whether everyone involved was mature enough to handle the bigger questions. Kalen understood the real stakes now. This wasn't about surviving the current crisis. It was about proving they were ready for whatever came after. The severance field offered safety through oblivion, but it also meant never knowing what might have been possible if they'd chosen to work together instead of wiping the slate clean. The choice hung in the distorted air. Erase 6 hours of history and go back to being strangers, or find a way to become partners in whatever came next. The temple waited. The Kirath waited. And Kalen realized his transformed biology might hold the key to a third option nobody had considered. The air in the canyon didn't part so much as it reconfigured itself. Sarilith entered the space without appearing to move through it. One moment there was empty air, the next there was a being whose form refused to stay fixed. She shifted between sapphire-skinned physicality and something closer to conscious energy, her outline blurring at the edges where dimensions intersected. She moved through the chaos of the battlefield like a dancer between raindrops, each step precise despite the reality distortions warping everything around her. Kalen watched her with his enhanced senses. Where the Kirath armor flowed like liquid metal, Sarilith's form flowed between states of being itself. She existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, her presence registering on spectra human science hadn't even named yet. In Kalen's vision, her wings looked less like physical appendages and more like structures that caught solar winds the way sails catch breeze. their surfaces rippling with energies that defied categorization. She didn't approach like a conqueror. She didn't take defensive positions or raise weapons. Instead, she moved toward the center of the conflict, her passage stabilizing the reality distortions around her. The temporal fluctuations smoothed out in her wake, the air settling into something closer to normal physics. Soldiers who had been aging backward found their bodies returning to their proper time streams. Her attention focused on Kalen, not with threat, but with recognition. She saw what the temple had made him, the biological bridge between human reality and whatever existed beyond. Her form shifted again, resolving into something more approachable while still maintaining that essential otherness. She had features that could be called a face, eyes that held depths human consciousness couldn't fully process. "Your species stands at the choice point," she said. Her voice wasn't sound so much as structured thought given form. It resonated in their minds rather than their ears. Isolation or collaboration? Stagnation or evolution? She gestured toward the severance engine display still active on the temple walls. That option remains. The safe path. The known quantity. Her form flickered, showing them glimpses of what that choice would mean. The reset, the forgetting, the return to ignorance. Or you can consider another way. Her presence reframed everything that had happened. The temple's transformation of Kalen, the Kirath's defense of holy ground, even the reality-warping weapons. All of it became part of a larger context. This wasn't about conquest or territory. It was about readiness, about whether humanity was prepared to take the next step. She showed them images not through words but through direct neural interface. Worlds where species had chosen collaboration. Civilizations that had evolved beyond their biological limits without losing their essential identity. Beings who had become partners with the cosmic processes that shaped reality itself. The universe isn't broken, her thought voice conveyed. It's evolving. And evolution requires catalysts, willing participants. The Kirath warriors watched her, their postures shifting from combat readiness to something closer to reverence. They recognized what she was, not a threat but an opportunity. Their weapons lowered. Their fluid armor settled into more stable configurations. Cyrillith's wings spread not in threat but in invitation. They caught light from the temple walls, refracting it into patterns that danced across the canyon. In Kalen's enhanced vision, he could see how they interacted with the local space-time, stabilizing the distortions caused by the Kirath weapons. She wasn't offering conquest. She was offering partnership, a chance to participate in the cosmic evolutionary process rather than just being subject to it. Her shifting form demonstrated the possibilities, biology and consciousness working together across dimensional boundaries, not as weapons but as tools for growth. The choice became clearer with every moment she remained. They could reset everything and go back to being what they were, or they could step forward into something new, something uncertain but potentially limitless. Cyrillith stood as living proof that evolution didn't have to mean losing yourself. It could mean becoming more while still remaining who you were. Her eyes met Kalen's across the space between them. She saw the temple's work in him, recognized the changes, understood the discomfort. Transformation feels like violation until you understand its purpose, her thought voice said, gentle but firm. This was never about conquest. It was always about invitation. Kalen stood bleeding in the center of the chaos. A Kirath energy weapon had grazed his side, leaving flesh burned down to the ribcage on one side. His enhanced senses were overloaded, feeding him contradictory information from multiple reality layers. He could see the human fleet targeting solutions lining up, the Kirath warriors preparing their final defensive measures, and the temple systems cycling toward some unknown critical threshold. Reality warped around him in dizzying patterns, the air itself flickering between states of existence. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arm wouldn't respond properly. The wound wasn't just physical damage, it was interfering with the temple's modifications to his nervous system. He could feel the biological upgrades short-circuiting, his expanded perceptions fragmenting into chaotic noise. The anchor point the temple had made him was failing, and the dimensional stability around them was fraying at the edges. Both sides prepared their final attacks. Human torpedo bays cycled open. Kirath warriors raised weapons that bent light into painful angles. The temple's emergency systems glowed with activation sequences that promised mutual annihilation. Kalen stood directly between these forces, Too wounded to move, too transformed to function properly. His enhanced vision showed him multiple possible outcomes, all ending in catastrophic energy release. Then Sarilith moved. Her form shifted from observing to action without transition. She recognized what was happening. The temple's chosen anchor was failing at the critical moment. If Kalen's connection broke completely, the dimensional frequencies would destabilize entirely. The resulting cascade failure would destroy more than just the battlefield. It would create a rift in local space-time that might never heal. Her wings unfolded across dimensions. To normal vision, they appeared as shimmering energy fields. To Kalen's failing enhanced sight, they looked like structured mathematics given physical form. They wrapped around him not as a barrier but as a tuning mechanism. The contact was instantaneous and overwhelming. For Kalen, the sensation was like being plugged into a starship's main reactor. Sensory input flooded his system, not just visual and auditory data, but dimensional frequencies, quantum state information, temporal coordinates. His mind tried to process inputs humans weren't designed to handle. The overload should have burned out his neural pathways completely. But Sarilith's presence acted as a regulator. Her wings didn't just shield him, they filtered and structured the chaotic input. The dimensional frequencies around them stabilized as she harmonized with Kalen's biological template. Her form shifted to match his resonance patterns, creating a feedback loop that restored order to the chaos. The temporal distortions smoothed out first. Soldiers who had been flickering through age reversals stabilized at their proper chronological states. The air lost its warped quality, light returning to normal propagation patterns. The opposing forces found their weapon systems coming back online properly, targeting solutions clearing as local physics normalized. Kalen's wound stopped bleeding. The tissue began reorganizing itself, the temple's biological modifications re-establishing control now that the dimensional environment had stabilized. His enhanced senses returned to functionality, but now with Sarilith's presence acting as a buffer against overload. The winged beings that had been flickering at the edges of perception became more substantial. With the frequencies stabilized, they could maintain coherent forms without risking dimensional feedback. They moved into positions around the temple, their presence further reinforcing the stabilized reality. Sarilith maintained the connection. Her wings wrapped around Kalen in a configuration that looked protective, but functioned as sophisticated technical interface. She wasn't just saving a soldier. She was maintaining the anchor point that prevented total dimensional collapse. Her action protected not just Kalen but everyone present, and potentially much more beyond. The crisis passed. The immediate threat of mutual annihilation receded, but Kalen remained wrapped in wings that sang with cosmic energies, his body serving as the stable point around which reality could rebuild itself properly. The alien goddess had indeed saved him at his lowest point, but not out of mercy, out of necessity. He was the linchpin holding everything together, and she was the master technician keeping that linchpin from shearing off under pressure. Kalen stood wrapped in wings that hummed with cosmic energies, the wound in his side already knitting itself back together under Sarilith's influence. His enhanced senses showed him the temple's systems interfacing with her presence, creating a stable feedback loop. The chaos of battle had subsided, replaced by an uneasy quiet as both human and Kirath forces watched the scene unfold. He could feel the temple's intention through the connection, not just to repair his body, but to demonstrate something fundamental. Humanity had always treated evolution as something that happened to them, a slow, impersonal force that shaped biology over millennia, a process you either endured or didn't. But Sarilith's presence conveyed a different understanding. Evolution wasn't passive. It was collaborative. It required participants willing to serve as catalysts, to actively engage with the processes of change rather than simply undergoing them. The thought voice came through the connection, clear and structured. The universe isn't broken. It's evolving, and evolution requires catalysts. The concept carried with it images of countless species across the cosmos, each making the choice to either resist change or embrace it as partnership. Some had chosen isolation and stagnated. Others had chosen collaboration and transformed in ways that expanded their possibilities, without erasing their essential nature. Kalen looked at the human soldiers, then at the Kirath warriors. Both sides had been fighting to preserve their current states, humanity to claim new territory, the Kirath to protect their sacred ground. Neither had considered that there might be a third option beyond conquest or defense. The temple's systems showed him potential futures branching from this moment. In some, they chose the severance engine and reset everything. In others, they found ways to work together. The choice wasn't between change and no change. It was between guided transformation and chaotic disruption. Evolution would happen regardless. The question was whether they would participate in directing it or simply be subject to its consequences. Sarilith's presence demonstrated what active partnership looked like. Her form shifted continuously, adapting to the local environment while maintaining coherence. She wasn't being reshaped against her will. She was choosing how to evolve in response to circumstances. Kalen's own transformation served as the perfect example. The temple hadn't simply changed him. It had offered modifications that his biology could accept or reject. His nervous system had integrated the new capabilities because they built upon existing structures, rather than replacing them entirely. The process felt invasive because he'd been passive during it. But now, with understanding, he could start making conscious choices about how to use these new abilities. The winged beings moved closer, their forms becoming more substantial in the stabilized environment. They represented what became possible when species chose active collaboration with evolutionary processes. They hadn't lost their essential nature. They had expanded it, learning to work with realities beyond their original biological limits. Sarilith's wings adjusted their resonance, fine-tuning the connection. Catalysts are rarely convenient, her thought voice conveyed. The message carried the weight of experience. Evolutionary leaps rarely came at comfortable moments. They emerged from crisis points, from moments when old ways stopped working and new possibilities became necessary for survival. The choice shifted in Kalen's understanding. It wasn't about whether to change. It was about how to approach the changes already happening. They could struggle to maintain stasis and eventually fail, or they could learn to shepherd the metamorphosis consciously, to work with the processes rather than against them. His enhanced senses showed him the temple systems waiting for a decision. The severance engine remained available, offering the clean reset. The Kirath weapon systems were still active but not targeting. The human fleet held position, their weapon systems cycling through standby modes. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Kalen realized the real test wasn't whether they could win a battle. It was whether they could recognize that evolution wasn't something to be endured, but something to be guided. The partnership Sarilith offered wasn't about surrender or conquest. It was about becoming active participants in the universe's ongoing transformation. The wound in his side finished healing. The temple's modifications settled into their final configurations. He could feel the new capabilities integrating with his consciousness, becoming tools rather than impositions. He understood now that his transformation wasn't an endpoint. It was the beginning of a new way of engaging with reality. Sarilith's wings remained wrapped around him, but the contact felt different now. Less like protection and more like connection. She wasn't holding him together anymore. She was demonstrating how to hold himself together while interacting with forces that would have previously overwhelmed him. The choice became clear in that moment. They could reset and go back to being what they were, or they could step forward into becoming what they might be. Kalen felt the choice settle into his bones. His transformed Kalen's transformation reached its final stage. The biological upgrades settled into stable configurations, his nervous system adapting to handle the multidimensional input without overload. He became what the temple had designed him to be, a fixed point in reality, an anchor that could withstand cosmic shifts without destabilizing. His enhanced perceptions clarified, the chaotic sensory flood resolving into distinct channels he could manage consciously. He could now perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously without confusion. He watched human soldiers, Kirath warriors, and winged beings moving through the same physical space but operating on different reality layers. His vision showed him the electromagnetic spectra where the Kirath armor flowed, the dimensional frequencies where the winged beings danced, and the normal human reality where his team stood. He found he could interact with all these layers at once, his biology serving as the interface point. The winged beings became fully substantial in his presence. Where before they had flickered at the edges of perception, now they moved with solid certainty. Kalen's stabilized biology created a safe zone around him, where dimensional boundaries remained firm. The winged beings gathered near him, their forms no longer causing the reality distortions that had marked their earlier appearances. They could finally return to physical reality without risking the catastrophic feedback that had forced their withdrawal centuries earlier. He became the harmonizing element between the three species. His human origins gave him understanding of his own people's limitations and fears. His connection to the temple provided insight into Kirath technology and culture. His biological modifications allowed him to communicate directly with the winged beings. He found he could translate between their different ways of perceiving reality, helping each species understand the other's perspectives. The temple's full purpose activated through his stabilized connection. The ancient machine had been waiting for this moment, for a biological anchor that could handle its complete systems coming online. The light patterns on the walls shifted from emergency displays to full operational status. The harmonic tone settled into a complex chord that structured the local space-time, creating a stable environment for the collaboration to develop. Kalen stood at the center of it all, his presence allowing the various systems to integrate properly. Human technology began interfacing with Kirath systems through the temple's mediation. The winged beings moved among the combined forces, their presence helping to stabilize the interaction points where different technologies met. What had been a battlefield became a laboratory where three species learned to work together. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. It required constant adjustment. Kalen found himself making small corrections to the interface, his biological connection giving him instinctive understanding of when systems started to drift out of alignment. He could feel the temple's systems responding to his guidance, the ancient machine finally operating at its intended capacity after centuries of dormancy. The winged beings began their work in earnest. With Kalen providing a stable anchor point, they could safely interact with physical reality. They moved among the human and Kirath forces, helping to bridge the technological and biological gaps between the species. Their presence facilitated communication, their ability to perceive multiple reality layers making them natural translators between different ways of thinking. Kalen's role became clear. He wasn't a leader or a commander. He was infrastructure, the living system that allowed these radically different beings to work together without destroying each other or their environment. His transformed biology provided the stability that made everything else possible. Without him, the collaboration would have collapsed into chaos. With him, it had a chance to succeed. The temple's systems showed the progress on their displays. Hybrid technologies began emerging from the collaboration. Human practicality combined with Kirath dimensional engineering and winged being harmonic science. The results looked strange but effective. Devices that operated across multiple reality layers simultaneously. The three species were creating something new together, something none could have developed alone. Kalen watched it all unfold through his enhanced senses. He could see the potential futures branching from this moment, some where the collaboration succeeded, others where it failed. His presence as the stable anchor point made the successful outcomes more likely. The cosmic welcome mat had been put out, and through him, the invitation to galactic transformation was finally being accepted. Seralith extended her awareness through the stabilized connection, her consciousness weaving through Zerion Prime's dimensional architecture like a master musician tuning an orchestra. The planet responded to her touch, its reality structure shifting from defensive rigidity to fluid adaptability. The air itself changed character, losing the strained quality of contested space and gaining the resonant hum of coordinated systems operating in harmony. Biology began merging with physics in visible ways. Soldiers watched their armor develop organic properties, self-repairing surfaces that flowed like liquid metal one moment and hardened the next. Kirath warriors found their fluid armor developing symbiotic relationships with the local environment, exchanging energy with the temple systems rather than just drawing power. The winged beings moved through these transformations as natural facilitators, their forms serving as templates for the emerging hybrid systems. Hybrid life forms started appearing across the battlefield. Crystalline plants sprouted from rock surfaces, their structures singing soft, harmonic frequencies that matched the temple's tone. Animals that looked part biological, part energy-based flickered into existence, moving with purpose through the chaos of the former conflict zone. These weren't random mutations. They followed patterns that integrated elements from all three species. creating new life forms that embodied the collaboration happening around them. Space itself began singing with structured mathematical patterns. The harmonic tone evolved into complex chords that shaped local reality, the vibrations arranging matter into new configurations. Human scientists watched their instruments register frequencies that shouldn't exist, mathematical concepts given audible form. The sound didn't just travel through air, it traveled through dimensions, its patterns visible as ripples in the fabric of reality when viewed through enhanced senses. The three species found themselves becoming co-authors of the unfolding transformation. Human engineers worked with Karath technicians to design systems that integrated organic and synthetic components. The winged beings provided guidance on dimensional stability, their understanding of reality's underlying mathematics helping to structure the changes. What had been separate technological traditions began merging into something new, a hybrid science that combined human practicality with Karath, fluid dynamics, and winged being harmonic principles. Reality rewrote itself in real time. Dead worlds visible through the canyon opening sprouted forests of singing crystal trees. Barren moons developed atmospheres that shimmered with energy patterns. The changes occurred simultaneously across multiple dimensions, the temple's influence spreading through reality layers that had been separate moments before. Space wasn't just being occupied, it was being reinvented. The air took on new properties. It carried information now, vibrating with data streams that all three species could interpret through their enhanced interfaces. Communication shifted from language to direct concept transfer, the mathematical frequencies structuring understanding across biological and technological divides. A human soldier could grasp a Kirath technical concept without translation, the information conveyed through harmonic resonance patterns. The temple itself transformed. Its walls became living interfaces that responded to thought and touch simultaneously. The ancient machine integrated elements from all three species, its systems evolving beyond their original design. It began generating new glyph patterns that combined human, Kirath, and winged being symbols into a unified language of transformation. Physical laws became more flexible in the stabilized environment. Gravity could be adjusted through harmonic tuning. Light bent in purposeful curves rather than straight lines. Time flowed at different rates in localized areas, allowing complex processes to complete in moments that would have taken years under normal physics. The three species learned to work with these new rules, developing techniques that would have been impossible before the transformation. The battlefield faded into memory. In its place grew a workshop where reality itself was the material being shaped. Human, Kirath, and winged being worked side by side, their combined efforts creating hybrid technologies and biological systems that represented something entirely new. The universe wasn't just changing around them, it was changing through them. Their collaboration serving as the catalyst for evolutionary processes that spanned dimensions. The mathematical patterns in space intensified, their songs structuring the ongoing transformation. What had been separate, biology, physics, culture, fused into a single evolutionary arc. The three species weren't just witnessing reality's rewriting. They were holding the pens, their choices and actions directly shaping how the universe evolved in that sector of space. The fighting stopped, not with treaties or surrenders, but because it became irrelevant. Soldiers from opposing sides found themselves holding tools instead of weapons, their hands automatically moving to repair damaged systems together. The temple's harmonic tone shifted from a battle alert to a work rhythm, structuring the new reality being built around them. Kalen watched human engineers passing crystalline components to Kirath technicians. Without needing to speak, the shared purpose transmitted through the structured air itself. Seralith's form settled into a stable configuration, her wings spreading to encompass the entire collaboration. "We begin the real adventure," she stated, her thought voice carrying to everyone simultaneously. The declaration felt less like a speech and more like a simple statement of fact. The real work started now that the shooting had stopped. The old conflicts evaporated like morning mist. Arguments over territory, resources, or holy sites became meaningless when reality itself could be reshaped through collaboration. A Marine who'd been defending a strategic position minutes earlier now helped a Kirath warrior recalibrate a dimensional stabilizer. The warrior's fluid armor shifted patterns to match the human's technical gestures, creating a hybrid interface that worked better than either species' technology alone. Existential dread gave way to focused curiosity. The fear of annihilation was replaced by the challenge of creation. Teams formed spontaneously across species lines, tackling problems that would have been impossible for any group working alone. Human improvisation combined with Karath precision and winged being harmonic science produced solutions that looked alien, but worked perfectly. A dreadnought's damaged reactor was repaired using techniques that blended welding torches with dimensional stitching and frequency alignment. The narrative truly shifted at that moment. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about discovery. Soldiers became explorers again, but this time they weren't mapping territory. They were mapping possibilities. What could three species create together that none could achieve separately? The answer began unfolding in real time across the canyon. Hybrid technologies emerged from the collaboration. Devices that used human materials, Kirath energy patterns, and winged being mathematics. They didn't look like anything from a single species tradition. They represented something entirely new. A communication system that transmitted concepts directly through harmonic resonance. A medical unit that could heal injuries by rewriting cellular memory across time. Each innovation built on the last, creating a cascade of creative progress. The winged beings moved through the workspace as natural facilitators. Their ability to perceive multiple reality layers made them ideal coordinators for projects that spanned different technological traditions. They helped human engineers understand Kirath fluid dynamics, showed Kirath technicians how human systems responded to stress, and guided both toward solutions that integrated their strengths. Kalen found his role evolving from anchor to guide. His transformed biology allowed him to sense when collaborative efforts were about to go off course, when different approaches were about to conflict instead of complement. He'd make small adjustments, suggesting a different material here, a modified frequency there, keeping the creative process moving forward smoothly. The temple itself became the ultimate collaborative tool. Its systems adapted to serve all three species equally, its interfaces changing to accommodate different biological and technological needs. The ancient machine seemed to enjoy finally operating at its full potential, its light patterns shifting with what almost looked like enthusiasm. What began as a battlefield was becoming the universe's most advanced workshop. The real adventure wasn't out there in some unexplored sector. It was right here, in learning how to work together across species lines. The old horizon of conquest and defense had been replaced by a new one, transformative partnership. The fear of the unknown gave way to the excitement of creating something unknown together. Saralith watched it all with what might have been satisfaction. Her form remained stable, her presence providing just enough guidance to prevent mistakes without stifling creativity. She'd seen species make this transition before, but never with such immediate, tangible results. The three species weren't just cooperating. They were co-creating, and that changed everything. The story doesn't end with a victory parade or a signed treaty. It closes with a team of human engineers and Kirath technicians, watching a hybrid generator come online for the first time, its hum harmonizing with the temple's ancient song. There's no final triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of seeing something work that shouldn't have been possible yesterday. The air still carries that mathematical music, and everyone knows this is only the beginning of something larger. The invitation extends beyond the canyon, beyond the planet, into the way viewers might consider their own world, not necessarily with alien temples or winged beings, but with the underlying idea that reality isn't fixed. That collaboration can rewrite more than battle lines. It can reshape what's possible. The narrative leaves that door open, suggesting that transformation doesn't require cosmic intervention, just willingness to work across old divides. What remains is a sense of wonder without specific boundaries. The hybrid plants growing from rock, the ships being designed with blended technologies, the three species learning each other's ways. These aren't endpoints. They're starting points. The story deliberately avoids showing where it all leads because the most important question isn't answered within the narrative. It's passed to the audience. The real story continues in the spaces between what was shown. In the months after the collaboration began, the three species will face practical problems, power distribution systems that need to accommodate different biological needs, communication methods that must bridge not just languages, but entirely different perceptual frameworks. The winged beings will help with some of this, but mostly they'll watch, allowing the others to find their own solutions. Kalen's role will evolve from anchor to facilitator. His transformed biology lets him sense when collaborations are about to go off course. But he'll learn to intervene less, to let the others work through their own misunderstandings. The temple will continue to adapt, its systems integrating more elements from all three species until its original design becomes just one layer in a much more complex system. The cosmic collaboration won't always be smooth. There will be setbacks, moments when old suspicions resurface, when the temptation to retreat to familiar isolation feels overwhelming. But the mathematical patterns in space will keep singing their structured songs, and the hybrid technologies will keep working, providing tangible proof that the new path offers rewards the old one didn't. The audience is left not with conclusions but with possibilities. The narrative doesn't show whether the collaboration succeeds long-term or what specific wonders it produces. Instead, it shows the process, the careful work of building trust across species lines, the patient integration of different technologies, the gradual rewriting of reality through shared effort. The real story exists in the continuation of that process, in the choices made after the cameras stop rolling. The winged beings will eventually share more of their history, not as a lecture but through the temple's interfaces. Others of their kind will arrive, drawn by the stabilized frequencies, and they'll bring knowledge from across the galaxy. But they won't take charge. They'll contribute their expertise while letting the younger species guide the direction of the work. Humanity's role will shift from conquerors to co-creators. The fear of the unknown will never completely disappear, but it will be balanced by the excitement of discovery. Every solved problem will open 3 new questions, and the collaborative effort will keep expanding to address them. The universe will keep evolving, and they'll be active participants in that evolution rather than passive subjects. The story closes with that sense of ongoing transformation. The final image isn't a celebration of victory, but a team of engineers from 3 species watching their first joint project come online. Their faces showing not triumph but focused curiosity about what to build next. The invitation stands not to witness a conclusion, but to imagine what might happen when old enemies become partners in reality's endless rewriting. Kalen became the bridge at his most broken moment. Wounded between armies, his transformation complete, he found salvation wasn't about being rescued. It was about becoming the connection point. Seralith's wings wrapped around him, but their touch wasn't just shielding. It was an invitation written in energy and intent, offering evolution instead of protection. The choice became clear. Keep fighting alone or transform together. Survival stopped meaning outlasting threats and started meaning outgrowing them. Sometimes staying alive requires becoming something new, and the real victory lies not in standing alone, but in building bridges where none existed before. The universe was. The air shimmered with more than heat now. Reality itself began rewriting around them, the very fabric of space-time adjusting to the stabilized connection between Kalen and Seralith. The 3 species watched as the environment transformed in real time, the battlefield ceasing to be a conflict zone and becoming something else entirely, a crucible where old animosities no longer made sense in the face of what was happening. Dead worlds visible. Through the canyon opening began to bloom. Kalen's enhanced vision showed him planets that had been barren rock moments earlier, now sporting strange hybrid flora. Crystalline trees grew alongside organic vegetation, their branches singing soft harmonic tones as they unfolded. Animals that looked like combinations of multiple species moved through alien landscapes, their forms shifting between biological and energy states. The transformation wasn't just happening on one world. It occurred simultaneously across multiple realities, the temple's influence spreading through dimensional boundaries that had previously been closed. Space itself began to sing. The harmonic tone that had started as a warning signal evolved into complex mathematical frequencies that structured the air around them. Human soldiers found their equipment adapting to the new environment, weapon systems recalibrating to handle the shifting physics, comm units picking up the strange music of space itself. The Kirath warriors' fluid armor shifted patterns in response to the frequencies, their movements becoming less defensive and more integrated with the changing environment. Cooperation became inevitable. Human engineers found themselves working alongside Kirath technicians without needing to speak. The temple systems provided a shared interface that translated intent directly. A Marine handed a Kirath warrior a power coupling without thinking about it, both of them responding to the same technical need displayed on the temple walls. The winged beings moved among them, their presence helping to stabilize the transition points where realities overlapped. The temple's displays showed what was happening on a cosmic scale. Entire sectors of space were undergoing similar transformations, the changes propagating through reality at speeds that defied conventional physics. Dead stars flickered back to life, their light singing the same mathematical frequencies that filled the canyon. Nebulas rearranged themselves into patterns that looked suspiciously like the temple's glyphs. Human and Kirath soldiers who had been aiming weapons at each other minutes earlier now found themselves back to back, dealing with localized reality fluctuations that threatened to destabilize the area. They developed improvised tactics without discussion, human projectile weapons covering areas where Kirath energy weapons caused dimensional feedback, Kirath shields protecting against temporal distortions that human technology couldn't handle. The winged beings moved through these cooperative efforts, their forms helping to bridge the technological and biological gaps between the species. The transformation wasn't peaceful exactly, but it was purposeful. Everyone understood that survival required collaboration now. The old conflicts over territory and resources became meaningless when reality itself was being rewritten around them. What mattered was maintaining stability through the transition, ensuring that the changes didn't spiral out of control and erase everyone from existence. Kalen watched through his connection with Seralith as the three species found their roles in the new reality. Humans provided biological stability and improvisational thinking. Kirath offered technological integration and dimensional awareness. The winged beings served as harmony regulators, keeping the various systems in balance. Together, they formed a complete system that could handle the cosmic transformation without collapsing. The temple itself continued to evolve, its systems integrating elements from all three species. Human interface patterns appeared alongside Kirath energy channels and winged being resonance fields. The ancient machine was becoming something new, a hybrid creation that reflected the collaboration happening around it. Its walls displayed the progress of the transformation across the galaxy, showing dead worlds coming back to life and empty spaces filling with new possibilities. Soldiers from opposing armies found themselves sharing rations, not because they'd become friends, but because the reality shifts required maintaining energy levels. A human medic treated a Kirath warrior's injury using supplies from both their kits, discovering that their biologies responded better to combined treatments. The temple provided guidance through its displays showing which combinations worked best. The air continued to sing with mathematical precision, the frequencies structuring the ongoing transformation. What had begun as a battlefield was becoming a workshop where three species learned to collaborate, not just for survival, but for creation. The crucible forced them to become partners because the alternative was ceasing to exist. Reality had rewritten the rules, and the only way forward was to rewrite their relationships along with it. Kalen stood at the exact center of the transformation. Seralith's wings still wrapped around him, though the physical contact had become unnecessary. The connection operated on levels beyond touch now. His enhanced vision showed him the branching paths forward with brutal clarity. One led back to isolation, humanity retreating behind defensive lines, the Kirath guarding their temples, the winged beings waiting for another species to try again someday. The other path led into unknown territory where all three species worked together, building something new from the chaos. His transformed biology made the choice more than theoretical. He could feel the gateway potentials within himself, the ability to anchor dimensional transitions, to stabilize reality interfaces, to serve as the living hinge between what was and what might be. The temple's modifications had turned him into a navigational instrument for cosmic evolution. He wasn't just choosing a diplomatic position. He was choosing how to use capabilities that were now part of his nervous system. The isolation option felt safe, familiar. Humanity could take what they'd learned and build better defenses. Study the captured Kirath technology, prepare for the next encounter. But his enhanced senses showed him where that path led. An arms race against forces they couldn't fully understand, with reality itself as the battlefield. They'd be fighting the universe's natural evolutionary processes rather than working with them. The collaboration path felt like jumping into unknown waters, letting the Kirath share their understanding of the temple systems, allowing the winged beings to guide the evolutionary process, trusting that humanity wouldn't be erased or absorbed in the transformation. But his expanded perception showed him the potential. Worlds where hybrid technology solved energy crises, where biological limitations became opportunities, where three species became more together than they could be apart. He looked at his team. They watched him, their expressions a mix of fear and hope. They'd followed him into this canyon as soldiers. Now they waited to see if he'd lead them into something entirely different. The Kirath warriors had lowered their weapons completely. Their fluid armor settled into neutral configurations. They understood the choice he faced. Their posture suggested they'd already made their decision long ago, to protect rather than expand, to wait rather than force. Seralith's presence remained steady in his mind. She didn't push him toward either option. She simply maintained the connection, allowing him to perceive the consequences of each choice with perfect clarity. Her thought voice conveyed no judgment, only patient waiting. She'd seen species make this decision before. Some chose safety. Some chose growth. Neither was wrong, but each led to different futures. Kalen felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't about tactics or strategy anymore. It was about identity. Did humanity want to remain what it had always been? Or was it willing to become something new? The question resonated through his transformed biology. The temple had chosen him because his particular combination of genetics, training, and psychology made him adaptable. Now he had to decide whether to use that adaptability or fight against it. He took a step forward, away from the isolation path. The movement felt symbolic, leaving behind the known for the unknown. His enhanced senses registered the shift immediately. The temple's systems responded to his choice, the light patterns on the walls flowing into new configurations that emphasized connection rather than separation. The harmonic tone shifted from warning to invitation. "I'll take option 3, he said aloud. The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of the decision, but they served their purpose. He wasn't just speaking to Seralith or his team. He was giving the temple its answer. Seralith's wings unfolded from around him, spreading to encompass the entire canyon. The gesture felt less protective now and more inclusive. Her thought voice carried approval, but also caution. Evolution requires active participation. This is only the beginning. The Kirath warriors moved forward, their fluid armor shifting to mirror the temple's new light patterns. They didn't approach as conquerors or defenders anymore. They approached as partners. Human soldiers lowered their weapons completely, the gesture feeling natural rather than forced. The winged beings became fully visible to everyone now, their forms stabilizing as the dimensional frequencies settled into the new configuration.